Adoptive son chooses his struggling biological parents over us, cutting ties and excluding us from his wedding after years of love, sacrifice, and support. It was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, seeing our adopted son get married. But it turned into one of the most heart-wrenching moments we would ever experience. We had been there for him through thick and thin, through all the hardships life threw at him. We gave him love, stability, and a sense of belonging when his biological parents couldn't. Yet, after all the sacrifices, all the years we spent building a life together, he made a decision that left us in shock. When he invited us to his wedding, we thought it was the start of a new chapter, a day of celebration for the family we had worked so hard to create. But instead, he blindsided us with the news that his biological parents, the very people who had abandoned him, would be taking the spotlight. Not only were we excluded from the wedding, but we also learned that he had chosen them over us. How could a son, who had once called us his parents, turn his back on us so completely? When we adopted him, he was just a child in need of love and care. His biological parents had struggled to provide for him, leaving him in a system that wasn't built for children like him. He was vulnerable, unsure of his place in the world, and we saw an opportunity to give him the family he deserved. It was not an easy decision, but we never once doubted that we would give him everything. The day he became a part of our family, we promised to love him unconditionally, to help him grow, and to be the parents he could always rely on. Years went by, and we watched him flourish. He excelled in school, found friends, and developed a personality that was as bright as his future. Our bond only deepened as he grew older. We spent countless hours supporting him, whether it was helping with homework, taking him to soccer practice, or even giving him advice about life. There was nothing we wouldn't do for him, and we were proud of the young man he had become. Yet, despite all of this, there was always an underlying tension when it came to his biological parents. They had given him up, and while we never spoke ill of them, we also made sure he understood that they were not the ones who had raised him. We believed that, over time, he would come to appreciate the sacrifices we had made. But we were wrong. It started with small things, texts, phone calls, and occasional visits that became more frequent over time. At first, we didn't think much of it. We wanted him to have a relationship with his biological parents, and we respected that. However, we could not help but notice that their presence began to overshadow our own. They were coming to family events, birthdays, and even school functions, slowly reclaiming a place in his life they had abandoned for so long. What hurt the most was not the fact that they were back in his life. It was the way he began to change. He became more distant, less appreciative of the family bond we had worked so hard to build. His attitude shifted, and we felt the growing wedge between us. He seemed to prioritize their approval over everything we had done for him. But when he announced his engagement, things took a turn we never saw coming. He told us about his wedding plans, and while we were happy for him, something didn't sit right. We were thrilled to support him through this new chapter, but we could never have prepared for what was to come. As the wedding day approached, he informed us that his biological parents would be front and center, and we would be relegated to the sidelines. It wasn't just a casual omission. It was a clear message that, after everything we had given him, we were no longer the family he chose. It all started when we received the invitation to his wedding. The envelope arrived at our doorstep one afternoon, its sleek, elegant design reflecting the gravity of the occasion. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, imagining the joy that would come from watching our son, our adopted son, start his own life. But as I read the invitation, my joy quickly turned to confusion. The first thing that stood out was the guest list. There, in bold letters, was a list of people who were invited to the wedding. His biological parents' names were at the top. Below them, his biological grandparents, distant relatives, and even family friends who we had never met or had little connection to. But when I looked closer, I saw that my husband and I, his parents, the ones who had raised him, loved him, and supported him through everything, were nowhere to be found. It felt like a slap in the face. We had raised him for the past decade, taken care of him when he was sick, comforted him during heartbreaks, and guided him as he transitioned into adulthood. We had invested our time, love, and energy into making him the person he was today. Yet now, it seemed that we had become strangers in his eyes. I could feel the pain starting to take over. This was supposed to be a joyous occasion. It should have been a moment where we stood proudly beside him as he started a new chapter with the love of his life. Instead, it was a reminder that we no longer had a place in his life the way we once had. I showed the invitation to my husband, and we both sat in silence, trying to understand what had happened. Had we done something wrong? Were we not enough for him? The questions lingered in the air, unanswered. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called him that evening, hoping to get some clarity. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. His voice sounded distant, almost as if he had been expecting this conversation. I tried to keep my tone neutral, but I could not hide the hurt in my voice. Why weren't we invited to your wedding? I asked, struggling to keep my emotions in check. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he responded, his voice filled with a strange form of guilt. I thought you would understand. I've been reconnecting with my biological parents, and it feels right for them to be there. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. This was not the answer I had hoped for. But we've been here for you all these years. We've been your family. How could you leave us out like this? There was another uncomfortable silence before he spoke again, his words laced with a finality that sent chills down my spine. I don't want to hurt you, but this is what feels right for me. I hope you can understand. Understand? How could I understand something that was so heartbreaking? It was as if all the love and sacrifices we had made were now forgotten, as if we had never mattered. And what hurt the most was that he was choosing them, his biological parents, over us. After everything we had done, this was how it ended. A single phone call, a few empty words, and the realization that our son no longer saw us as his family. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. I tried to look back at the years we had spent together, wondering where things went wrong. But nothing made sense. He had been happy, and we had been there for every moment. We had celebrated his milestones, his achievements, and his growth as a person. And now, it seemed like all of that had been erased. The more I thought about it, the more it hurt. I wanted to believe that maybe there was something more to his decision, that perhaps he was just confused, or that he was struggling with his identity as an adopted child. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the case. His decision was final, and we had no place in his life anymore. As the days passed after that painful phone call, I could not shake the overwhelming feeling of betrayal. I replayed every moment in my mind, trying to find some clue, some indication of what had led him to make this decision. It was as if he had been slowly drifting away from us, and we had not even noticed. I kept in touch with my husband, but we both struggled to understand what had happened. We had poured our hearts into raising him. We had been there for his first steps, his first heartbreak, his graduation, and countless other moments. And now, it seemed as though all of that meant nothing to him. I could not let it go. I had to know the truth. What had happened to the son I thought I knew? So I began to dig deeper. I started by reaching out to people who had been close to him during the years, friends, relatives, anyone who might have known what was going on in his life. It was a close friend of his, someone I had known since he was a child, who finally opened up to me. We were sitting together one evening when she casually mentioned something that made my heart stop. "You know, it's strange," she said, her voice low. "But I've noticed that your son has been spending more time with his biological family recently." My stomach twisted. I had known about his occasional visits to his biological parents, but this felt different. Why had he been so secretive about it? Why had he not told us the truth about his feelings? But there was more to the story, something deeper than I had expected. "He talks about them all the time now," she continued, unaware of the shock her words were causing. "And I overheard him say once that he was feeling closer to them than he was to you and your husband. He said that you were his adoptive parents, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward his real family." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. It was as if a door had been opened, revealing a truth I had never expected. He had never referred to us as his real family before, but now, it seemed like he was distancing himself from everything we had built together. But there was something more to this, something that gnawed at me with every passing day. I couldn't shake the feeling that his decision to cut ties with us had been influenced by more than just a desire to reconnect with his biological parents. It didn't make sense. There had to be another explanation. I turned to my husband, hoping for some clarity, but he, too, was lost in his own thoughts. We spent hours talking about everything, his childhood, our relationship with him, and what might have changed. But nothing added up. Then, one evening, my husband received an unexpected call from one of his old friends, a man who had been close to him for years. The conversation was brief, but the impact it had on me was immediate. "You wouldn't believe what I've learned," my husband said, his voice shaky. "Apparently, your son has been talking to my old friend, his biological father's best friend. He's been telling him that we've been holding him back, that we've been stifling his growth. And this friend, he's been feeding him ideas. Ideas that aren't true." My heart sank. I had never imagined that someone would manipulate him in such a way. It was clear now that his decision was not a spontaneous one, nor was it entirely his own. Someone close to him, had been guiding him, influencing his thoughts and opinions about us. I could not believe what I was hearing. My husband was furious, but I was left with a deep sense of sadness. How could we have been so blind? How could we have missed the signs that our son was being manipulated, that he was being torn away from us by outside forces? It became painfully clear that his decision to exclude us from the wedding was not just a reflection of his feelings, but the result of something far more sinister. Someone had been planting seeds of doubt in his mind, convincing him that his biological family was the only place he truly belonged. And now, we were paying the price for our love and devotion. I tried to reach out to him again, hoping that he would listen to me, but every attempt was met with resistance. The walls he had built around himself were too strong. I was no longer the mother he confided in, the one he trusted with his deepest fears and dreams. Now, I was an outsider, someone who had no place in his life. As much as it hurt, I began to realize that there was nothing I could do to change his mind. The damage had been done. His biological family, along with their influence, had won. We had lost him, and there was no going back. But there was still a part of me that refused to accept this reality. I couldn't let go of the hope that one day he would come to see the truth, that we had given him everything we had, that we had been the family he could always count on. But the longer I waited, the more I realized that it might never happen. His path had already been set, and we were no longer a part of it. The days that followed his decision were filled with a quiet, suffocating emptiness. There were moments when I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of everything we had lost. The wedding was approaching, and I could feel it looming over me like an insurmountable mountain. I had always dreamed of seeing my son, the boy I had raised, marry the love of his life. But now, it seemed as though that dream had shattered into a million pieces, scattered beyond my reach. I tried to focus on my own life, to fill the void with something, anything, but the pain never seemed to subside. Each day, I would look at his empty room, at the places where his laughter used to fill the air, and wonder what had gone wrong. My husband, too, was struggling. He had always been the pillar of our family, the one who kept us grounded when things felt uncertain. But now, even he seemed to be lost in his grief. We tried to move forward. We spent time with friends and family, trying to distract ourselves from the harsh reality that our son had chosen a different path. But the hollow feeling remained. I could not stop thinking about him. I wondered if he ever thought about us, if he ever regretted the distance he had put between us. But every time I picked up the phone to call him, I stopped myself. I knew it would only bring more pain, and I wasn't sure I could take any more rejection. Months passed, and the day of his wedding arrived. My heart ached as I thought about the wedding day, imagining what it would have been like if he had only chosen us to be a part of it. I could almost picture him, standing at the altar, with his bride by his side. But that image felt like a dream, one I would never be able to touch. On the day of the wedding, I stayed home. I did not want to attend. I did not want to be there as an outsider, someone who had been cast aside. But I could not bring myself to watch from afar, to witness the man my son had become without me by his side. So, I stayed in the silence of my home, surrounded by the remnants of a family that no longer existed. Then, out of nowhere, I received a phone call. I almost didn't answer it, thinking it was just another reminder of how much had changed, how much we had lost. But something told me I should pick it up. When I did, the voice on the other end caught me off guard. It was my son. "Mom, it's me." I almost couldn't breathe. I had not heard his voice in so long. The sound of it was so familiar, yet distant. It felt like I was hearing from a stranger, someone who had once been so close to me, but had become a shadow of the person I knew. "I know you're probably angry with me," he continued, his voice soft. "But I needed to talk to you. I've been doing a lot of thinking." I could hear the hesitation in his words, the uncertainty that I had not heard in him for years. It was a small spark of hope, but it was enough to make my heart race. "You don't have to explain," I said, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to fall. "I just want to know that you're okay." He paused for a moment, as though gathering his thoughts. "I'm not okay, Mom. I've been so caught up in all of this that I didn't even realize how much I hurt you. I was wrong." My heart skipped a beat. The words I had longed to hear were finally being spoken. But part of me couldn't believe it. Was this real? Was he really reaching out after all this time? "I've been confused," he said, his voice cracking. "I let others tell me what to do, what to think. And I started to believe that my biological family was the only place I belonged. But I was wrong. You and Dad were always there for me, and I took that for granted." The tears finally came, spilling down my face as I listened to him. I had no words. I couldn't speak. All I could do was listen, hoping that what he was saying was real, that he truly understood the depth of his actions. "I want to make things right," he continued. "I don't want to lose you. I've made so many mistakes, but I'm ready to make amends." It was in that moment that I realized something I had not fully understood before. Healing would not come overnight. It would take time. But the fact that he had reached out, that he had finally seen the truth, was enough to give me hope. We were not there yet, but we could start to rebuild the relationship we once had. Over the following weeks, we spoke more often. He apologized for the pain he had caused, and I forgave him, though the scars of the past would take time to fade. Slowly, he began to reintegrate into our lives. He came over for dinner, spent time with us, and most importantly, acknowledged the love we had always given him. But even as we began to heal, I knew that things would never be the same. Our family had been changed forever by his decision to walk away. The hurt, the betrayal, the feelings of abandonment, those were things we would carry with us. But with time, we learned to accept that our family's story was not a perfect one. It was messy, complicated, and filled with mistakes. But it was ours, and we had the chance to rebuild it, piece by piece. As for his wedding, I did not attend. But I did not hold it against him either. He had chosen to go down a different path, and though it hurt, I understood that his journey was his to make. In time, we would find our way back to each other, even if it was not the same as before. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever experienced a moment where family bonds were tested, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.